Hey, what's going on, fam? Welcome to another episode of the Feed Me, Fuel Me podcast. Durs and Jeff coming to you live in Feed Me, Fuel Me studios with the owner of Paradise Valley Lifestyle, North Scottsdale Lifestyle, and soon to launch Scottsdale Lifestyle.
You got it.
Magazine. Ooh, nailed it. Tammy Fellows. I am for sure notorious for blowing that.
You passed.
Appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
You're one of the, like we were saying offline, one of the 5 natives I know.
Yes. My husband jokes he married the only native to the area.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a rare breed out here. We never meet Arizonians.
No.
Everybody's a transplant.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
When we met, I think you told me you were 5th generation.
Well, you know what's funny? So for years, I always said I was 4th generation,
Okay.
but I was corrected recently
Ooh.
by my father, because it's on that side of the family,
Okay.
that I'm actually 6th generation. If you can believe that's even possible.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
It is possible, and that's me. So, and then my kids would obviously be 7th after that. So
Right.
it's kind of crazy. I mean,
Oh,
they
man.
truly, my forefathers, for lack of a better way to put it, were like settlers in the gold rush here in Globe, Arizona. So,
Oh, my goodness.
yeah,
Wow.
crazy, crazy
Man.
deep roots, lots of history.
So you are in a special camp of badass women we've had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And you are raising 4 boys.
Yes,
Your
sir.
husband is an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
I really want to dive into balance with you
Alrighty.
because I'm sure that's one huge juggling act,
Oh, all the time.
you know. But for everybody who doesn't know your story, you came up in media and then decided to move into your own entity.
Yes.
Yeah, walk us through that process. What was it about where you were at that sparked the inspiration to go off on your own?
Well, my experience straight out of the gate when I went to school was in publishing. So I quickly grew.
Time out. Are you a Wildcat or a Sun Devil?
I'm a wildcat. You're not going to hold that against me. I knew you were going to say something.
Oh, interview's over.
Right?
We're done. We're done.
I get that a lot. That's all right. Whatever. No, even my siblings tease me. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, too. So my brothers especially, they both are ASU grads. And they're
Okay.
like, oh, my gosh, get her out of here. So anyway, but yeah, my background, basically I started, I cut my teeth, if you will, on business magazines in the telecommunications space. So
Okay.
I launched magazines and websites and put on small, high-end conferences and very large trade shows in the telecommunications world. So my clientele were really the C-suite executives at the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world.
Okay.
Lots of global travel, lots of travel generally, which was great. And it was very much a man's business. So I learned a ton, which was great as well. Eventually, I ended up spinning off on my own and launched a media business with a partner. And we focused primarily on events, but it was just within the United States. So it was a little less travel because I was doing all this while I was raising my 4 babies. So I always worked out of my home. So I always had that spirit of entrepreneur because I was really independent. There was no micromanaging going on.
Yeah.
So I always felt pretty independent with every place that I was before.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty natural fit for me to work from home successfully. But of course, that came with the travel piece, which was tough. So when I launched off on my own, again, it was more national. After some time with that, I realized that partnerships can be tough.
Yes, they can.
And I learned that
Jeff's the worst.
I was going to say the same thing about him. but-
you know, it's just a different beast. So I ended up peeling myself out of that when I realized that it was not working for me any longer. So I took a 2-year sabbatical, which was amazing because obviously I've got a very large family and I was able to reconnect with them and my husband, who's amazing. And so, but you know, after the first year, I'm not going to lie, I got very antsy. I'm very entrepreneurial. So for me, it was like, okay, all my kids are in school all day. What the heck am I doing? So I was ready to really start looking. So I put my toe in the water, started looking on my network on LinkedIn, which is pretty extensive because I had a lot of experience. But I was in no rush to make a bad decision. So I waited for the right thing to come along, and that's when lifestyle kind of popped out of nowhere. And it was really meant to be. I'm a big believer that things happen just exactly when they should. So it was perfect timing. And from there, that's where I kind of got my start with them. So it's been going ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what are some of the instruments that you have in place let's start from the top down. Being married to another entrepreneur, how do you keep things fresh with your husband?
We are an excellent team, and I can tell you that comes from really strong communication skills. I'm very, very blessed and lucky that I chose a partner in life that communicates exceptionally well, unlike a lot of male energy can. And so that was sort of a prereq for us, and that's why I think we hit it off. And, you know, honestly, I keep it fresh with him because he is hilarious.
He is.
I laugh all the time. I mean, he is just the funniest man. So when I first met him, it really, people laugh, do you believe in love at first sight? Him and I were awestruck from the get-go.
Really?
Yes. When we first laid eyes on each other, we were very smitten from the start. So things built. We were friends for about 6 months before anything got real serious. But I think the foundation of friendship is key because, again, that communication piece comes into play, and we communicate so well and share. And, you know, when we're struggling with something, it's like, hey, what's on your mind? Let's talk about it. We just tackle things as they come up. There's really no other way to do it successfully, honestly. We've been married for 16 years, so.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
huge. That's a
Right
huge
on.
accomplishment.
So when it comes to, you know, that communication piece, is that something that is innate to the both of you? Because, you know, couples can agree on that shit in the beginning, you know, but following through with it and holding each other accountable to that standard, especially as time goes on,
Right.
and you become used to each other,
Right.
you know, some of those things can go by the wayside.
Sure.
So, like, is that something that you model from other successful couples? Like, where does that come from for you?
You know, it's funny that you asked that because I think, honestly, we are models for a lot of other couples because we are just we're just open. We're very honest people, and we've been through rough patches. I mean, every marriage has.
Right.
It's impossible not to have struggles. I think you have to work through them as they come, and you have to navigate them. And being open, I mean, it's funny, people laugh because we'll have these evenings where we just are like, the kids are in bed and let's just sit and just talk. And we will literally talk like two girlfriends gabbing at each other for like hours. And I'm not saying he's like a girl. It's just, we just communicate well. We have fun, we laugh, we tell stories, we share what's going on, how we're feeling. If there's an issue that comes up, we talk about it. I mean, if one of us is miffed about something, we look at each other and we're just like, what's up? Let's talk about this. So we just tackle it.
Yeah.
I think that's huge in a relationship. If you can tackle things as they come up, otherwise they become underlying issues, and then they come out passive aggressively, and then it becomes a whole mess. So if you can tackle things as they come up, that's the key.
Yeah. Now you got 4 boys.
Yes, and that's a whole nother element.
Rocking
Crazy.
it.
Yeah.
What's it feel like? I have to ask on behalf of my mom because she did that.
Yeah.
Career woman. And raised 4 boys, a 5th if you include my dad.
Totally, that's true. That's a real thing.
Let's keep it honest.
That's a real thing.
How do you and your husband balance business and raising 4 boys whose schedules are, you know, at the point they're at, just all over the place?
Oh yeah, they are really very much that way now. I mean, they all are school age. So my youngest is a first grader. But honestly, and then my oldest is a freshman in high school. So yeah, we are all across the board, and they're boys, and they have tons of crazy boy energy. They're all very alpha personalities. So it's a lot. My house is loud. I live at the circus. We laugh a lot too because it's just hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of humor with that. It's it's funny. So, but balance. It comes down to we share. We when one of us has something going on, every day people laugh. I mean, everything is as scheduled as we can make it because that's the only way you can operate when you've got that many people to take care of.
Right.
But so everything is pretty scheduled, but we literally talk about it day to day. Like you were asking me earlier about, I was telling him that I was going to do this today. He didn't know this was happening today. And it's not because I wasn't sharing it with him. It's just because we're like all over the place. It's minute to minute. It's day to day. He had a crazy busy day, so he left early. So, of course, he'll want to be here too, which we talked about.
Oh, yeah, we got to get him on. We're getting him on for sure.
He's great. You'll love him. Anyway, but it's just, again, it goes back to that communication. So we share in our responsibilities. It's tough because we both play such different roles. As a mother, I'm the queen. And I mean that not necessarily in the best way. I mean, they really look to me for the woman figure in their life, and they really lean on me, and I sort of have that soft and tender side, but yet that hard disciplined side on the other, on the flip side. And then Eric has his role with the boys as well. And it's funny, I see shifts through the phases of life and their ages. I'm seeing shifts. So there's times when they all have been severe mama's boys. I mean, and they all still very much are. I mean, literally my 15-year-old will snuggle up to me and hold my hand and we'll watch a movie. And it's just, they're very sweet and tender boys, but they, then they kind of shift into wanting to get dad's approval and attention and that athleticism. And my husband jokes, he's like, this one wants to be like me, this one wants to be me. And it's true. I mean, it's funny, and they shift.
Yeah,
it shifts with ages and with just time and life and experience. So it's fun though. I mean, they're so great. They're a lot of fun. They keep us entertained.
Yeah. And as far as because of what you do, I think every time I see you on social media, you're glammed up for another event. I would imagine that you're turning down more events than you accept invitations to.
Yes.
What do you what's some of your definitive criteria that makes an event worth showing up to?
To be honest, it's funny because now that I've got the magazines, my role has shifted. So my work life previously was one where I would travel somewhere and I would do everything I was doing and then I'd come back and I'm kind of at my home base. Here it's very different because it's local, hyper local. So I have to be out in the community. I have to know what's going on. I have to feel the energy of the things that I'm involved with because with these magazines, I reach a very high-end luxury marketplace with people that have lots of money, frankly, and are very philanthropic and give back. So for me, the content in the magazine is feel-good content. It's charitable content. It's content that talks about ways to give back. So I have to be really picky and choosy about what I get myself involved with because I get invited to all kinds of things. I mean, my husband jokes, he's like, what are we doing tonight? We don't. And I'm like, you know what? We're having a date night. Nice. And then he's like, what? No, I'm kidding. But honestly, I just have to pick and choose which events and which things have meaning to me. I have obviously a soft place in my heart for anything that's child related, anything that's animal related. There's certain charities that are, disease-ridden heart disease, things like that have meaning to me, cancer, research, things like that, because I've been exposed to those illnesses in my life with my family. And I have a very large family. Like I said, I'm the youngest of 5. So there's been a lot, and we have extensive cousins, and there's just a lot of people. So for me, it just depends on what really makes me tick. Yeah. And that's how I decide what I'm going to do. And it's true. You say that. You see the social media picture of me all glammed up. I am truly, if I had my choice, I would never wear makeup. I would be wearing my sweats and be home in my bathrobe. So I'm just kind of a comfort creature.
You should start a gym.
I know, right?
All day, every day.
I know. Well, see, that's the funny thing. I'm not used to having, because I used to work from home. But my job, I was doing emailing and internet or phone calling all day long. And I would travel, and then I was, dolled up for those things. But now I'm out all the time, just out every day, meeting with people and doing things. So that's new for me, having to really actually get dressed for the day. Yeah. It's all right, but it's just like I'm just not used to it. So that's all.
With your experience, are you online publication or are you just print media?
It's print media, but we do have an online profile for it as well.
How has that been navigating that water from like the transition where print media was like the boss in the space to online presence taking over, where like sort of newspapers aren't like read like they used to be? How has that been navigating those waters as an entrepreneur? Because that can be tough, I would imagine.
A great question. So it's funny because in the business that I was in previously, business magazines, if you will, print, that was a struggle. And that's when I sort of came online, pardon the pun, to launch some of their digital platforms because it was absolutely necessary. Those were a little more news heavy. Of course, they were print magazines, so the content was a little more evergreen, but it was business related. So it had to be with the times and things that were changing. So with print, it is difficult in that segment to do it. The cool thing is, and this is the reason I always had an affinity to community publications. I didn't think I would be in the luxury market. I just thought it was fun to be, a cute little neighborhood magazine, right?
Right.
But I'm playing in a whole other space for that.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, that really is on the rise. Lifestyle publications, and I don't mean our brand, I mean just the style of publication, which is lifestyle, in the category is on the rise. People want feel-good content, and they want to hold it in their hands. So there is always going to be digital play, and I always explain this to people. They play together. You have to do both. You have to have a presence on both, because there's people that don't. I'm one where I like to hold something in my hands to read it. There's tons of people that would rather read it on a screen. It's a personal preference thing, but they really, truly play together. So for this style of magazine, it's not, that part isn't challenging, because they really play together.
Yeah.
They're in the same category. It is awesome. It's not as much of a challenge. If I was still in the business world with that, I think it would be different.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you always hear like the latter perspective where they're like, we can't get the attention that we used to anymore, so now we're trying to switch to the digital side. But it's interesting to hear like that perspective, because it is true. Like the more digital things have gotten, the more people have regressed to going to the traditional means, like grabbing a book and just reading the paper, highlighting pages instead of like looking at a Kindle and highlighting with their finger, so to speak.
Exactly.
Interesting to see how that transition happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, it comes down to what people prefer, and because this is a lifestyle publication, it's very photo heavy. It focuses on beautiful photography, so that plays really well with things online. So everything, it pops, everything. I mean, you think of Instagram, it's all photo driven. That's what it is. It's a photo driven platform. So it goes perfectly with this style of magazine. So it works well. Yeah,
I mean,
it's good.
You had to explain all of that to me when we had our initial conversation, because I was under the impression, and I've actually been told by internet marketers who've solicited my business through the gym, the print is dying. It's outdated. Nobody's reading magazines anymore, and it's so interesting that you have a niche in the lifestyle market, because it's a totally different animal, it sounds like.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It really is. Yeah, for sure. There's a different need, a different purpose.
Right. With regards to the market you serve now in the luxury space, how different is that?
You mean
Because you said
specific?
you never
the
thought
high-end market?
Yeah, you just said that you'd never thought about being in the luxury space.
Right.
And here you are now. Is it different? Is it different from getting the voice that you have to cater to them, or?
It is interesting. That's a great question. When I first came into this, because I am a very down-to-earth, real person, and in this space, you come across a lot of people that aren't as authentic. Not that it's bad. That's just, we just have different lives.
Sure.
So for me, the thing that I love is the fact that I own the magazine, and I can craft the message to be tailored to how I see things.
Yeah.
I focus heavily on feel-good content, which is really what the drive of the magazine is to be. But when it goes back to the events that you talked about, being picky and choosy about what you're involved in, because there's a lot of areas where you walk into a sandbox, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think I belong here. In not a bad way for them, I just don't. It's just not my realm.
Right. These aren't my people.
But the great thing is I'm very adaptable, and I can carry myself in any room or carry on a conversation with anyone. So for me, I'm lucky. I just have that communication skill to be able to do that, to adapt. But it's very interesting, because I didn't see my sister. It's funny that you said that too, because my sister, when I was getting all glammed up for the event that I went to last Saturday, the picture that you saw.
Yeah.
I had my hair and makeup done, and it was because one of my clients, I wanted to go and try out her salon and use her services, and
cool,
it was really like I wanted to do that with her and for her, and so I took a picture, just a dorky selfie of myself, and sent it to my sister, and she laughed. She's like, "Oh my gosh, Tam, you're one of those people in those magazines now." And I'm just laughing. I'm like, my response was, "I know, this is so not me." It is true. I mean, it's funny. So, don't believe everything that you see. It may not be what you think.
Yeah.
So not in a bad way, just.
Sure.
What goes into putting together a publication, like the organization and like getting the topics that you want? Like, how's that go from beginning to end? Like, that has to be an insane process, because I don't think I could do that.
It is. Well, with print, anything in print, there's cycles and deadlines. So you have to think way ahead with everything that you do. It's funny. Just today, before I came here, I was on an hour and a half phone call with my editor about planning. We were doing a lot of planning for the rest of the year for some of the features that we had planned and who we wanted to plug in where and what the features would look like. And it takes a lot of planning and extreme organization, which I'm pretty good at. I'm not always perfect. It gets a little hectic and I juggle a lot because I'm doing a lot of different things. There's a lot of aspects to the magazine, but it takes extreme organization and thought and forethought, and you're always thinking of things. So when you're talking with someone, you're thinking 10 steps ahead of how you can craft something to do something else. So everything kind of plays in together.
Yeah.
But you have to think out of the box a lot.
So like going into like I'll just make it like a July publication and it's March or whatever.
Oh, we already have our stories planned for July.
Really? So and you base it off of like one idea. It's like July's going to be about this, for instance, and then go from there?
Well, we have themes. So basically every issue, every month for lifestyle, we have I call it an underlying theme. And the reason I call it underlying is because there's always different content sprinkled in every issue that we have.
Yeah.
So it's not stuck to a theme. Typically our covers have some sort of theme, if you will. For instance, this was our April issue, which was all about eco-friendly stuff. So the cover was one of the stories we did on the Simple Farm. Everything she does, she makes skincare out of the botanicals she grows right on her property.
Yeah.
So that was what the cover feature that we put on the cover because we wanted to stick to that eco-friendly theme.
Right.
So it's with the themes, it makes it a little easier to start plotting in different articles that you want to cover and different events and different things that you want to feature in each, particular month.
Interesting.
So the themes help.
That's cool. What drove you to media and like going towards that? What gravitated towards that industry? Was it something that you did as a little girl growing up that brought you there, or was it just that you happened into that industry?
Well, with media in general, it's funny because I fell into it. Honestly, my passion was communications. So the history started with, my grandfather, who lived here his whole life, he basically was the pioneer for cable television in the Phoenix area. So, he lobbied with the FCC to get licensing.
Yeah.
He has a remarkable story for the start and foundation of cable television here in Arizona, in the Valley here specifically. And so for me, and then my dad obviously followed on that path. One of my siblings is also very much involved in that. And so that was sort of always an interest to me.
Yeah.
So right out of college, I ended up with an internship out in Washington, D.C., with the Wireless Communication Association, it was called, and did an internship there, and I worked on their events, so I was entrenched in the communications business. But from there, it was a media side, because it was an association, they did events, they had a publication, and various other aspects within that industry. So I got recruited for my first real job after my internship right out of college, and worked in Southern California for some time, and I was literally a copy editor for one of their business magazines. So then from there, it kind of developed into helping them sell advertising and working on different features, again, in the telecommunications space. So that's kind of where it started. And then I went into their events, but then the media side just kind of ended up taking over. I was focused on communications with the media business where I launched other magazines and things. But the media side has always been of interest to me. So that's really, I kind of got there in a roundabout way. I wasn't intending to be in media per se, but it just life just kind of took me that direction. So
that's dope.
Yeah.
Of all the places you've been and traveled, why come back to home base?
So I was living in California. My fiance at the time, who's now my husband, we lived out there, and 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And it was crazy because when that happened, we woke up that morning and we had just landed the day before on the same exact flight. The day before one of the 9/11 flights, the one that was going into the Pentagon, because we were actually out in Washington, D.C. visiting his mother. And it was the same exact flight, but it was the day before. So we made it home, obviously. But if we'd have been a day later, we would have been on that flight coming home, because we were flying back to California, and it was a flight from D.C. to L.A. So when we got home, we woke up that morning, we're getting ready for work, and turn on the news, and of course, you see everything that's going on, and these buildings coming down, and we literally had a powwow and said, you know what, let's go home. We both have family here, and we just thought life is short. Let's be close to the ones we love. I had family out in California too, but not my immediate family. So that's what brought us back here. And honestly, Arizona is such a beautiful place. We didn't know we'd end up having 4 children. We hoped we would, but we didn't know we'd get there. So, but when we came back here, it was more affordable. It was a beautiful place to live. It was some place I didn't appreciate as a child, appreciate much more now when you go away and come back.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think that's probably why we love it. Will we stay here for the rest of our lives? I can't say that for certain, but right now it's the perfect place for us.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Well, especially after visiting, spending time in the rat races that are LA and DC. That's where I'm from, back east.
Yeah.
So I have a huge appreciation for Arizona in my adult life after spending time back east and in California with a little bit in the Marine Corps. But no, I totally agree and feel you 100% on making the move back here.
very different pace.
Yeah.
When I went out to the East Coast and lived in DC,
How'd you like it?
the second I arrived, I was like, I am not an East Coast person. I loved it. I really did love it, but it was fun for the purpose that it served. But honestly, I realized very quickly that I did not belong on the East Coast. Just totally different mentality. California was okay, and I was actually ended up in Orange County. It wasn't even LA, but Orange County was good. But just the cost of living and missing my family really is what it came down to.
Sure.
So, but you're right. Very different mentality.
East Coast is different, man.
You spent some time in Philly.
Oh yeah, I lived
so
in Philly for a year. Was it an essay or a song, something like that, where the guy's like, live in the East Coast, but leave before you get too hard. Live on the West Coast, but leave before you get too soft. And like it's totally like that's how
that, I mean, that's kind of
that works.
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. No, that's it's interesting that the 9/11 parallel is there because that was my senior year of high school back east, and have very, very distinct memories of you guys were a day ahead of that flight. My mom had a meeting in the Pentagon that morning.
No way.
That got canceled. So, I mean.
Oh my God. See, I have goosebumps.
Yeah. I mean,
there's so many parallels.
All of us sitting on this couch right now have the dialogue of the universe and living in flow and nothing happens on accident and, all of those things. And, that's just another instance of nothing is an accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing's by chance.
That's crazy because this cat from Alamogordo died in the plane where I'm from. I went to school with his sons and played football with them.
Really?
He died on the plane. He's one of the what do you call it, flight attendants. He got stabbed fighting one of the guys, and that's the one that flew into the first plane, the first building.
The first tower?
Yeah, first tower. It's like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Crazy.
Wow.
Nuts.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in years.
No, man.
Yeah.
It's wild, man. I mean, if you go back to that specific period in time, so many of us are connected by that event in all kinds of random ways.
Yeah, it's wild.
Sam, one of my interns at the gym, his dad was supposed to be in the tower that morning.
No kidding.
And wasn't.
Wow.
Because he was late to school. Yeah. Completely random chain of events.
That's wild, dude.
Speaking of, but I use that dot connection to drive home move the conversation into that of the universe and living in flow, because it's a very common dialogue that I talk about in the book. It's pretty much the foundation of this entire show. Where does that come from for you? Because I know so many people get into this, raise their frequency to this level, after they see, movies like The Secret for the first time and start to fall in love with the idea of manifestation. And then they start really looking at how manifestation really works. And, for where you're at, you've now got 3 publications. Is this a life that you've manifested? Like this is you're letting the universe conspire in your favor, as the alchemist would say. Where does that school of thought come from for you?
That's a great question. And for me, at a very young age, it was very innate, and it comes from how I am with my parents. My mom and my dad, they're not together, and they haven't been for many, many years. But both of them individually, it's funny because even later in life, when my husband got to know each of them individually, he's like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. I see the pieces that you get here. I see the pieces that you get there. And really, truly, the two of them individually are very spiritual people. We're not a religious family, but we're very, very spiritual. So everything that we talk about has meaning. We're I think, honestly, this kind of goes back to, and this really has a purpose. My mother, so her family she had just had her first son, my oldest brother.
Okay.
Her father, who was a race car driver, this is my grandfather, this is before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
He and his wife, her mom, and her 2 brothers, and one of the brothers' fiance at the time, my grandfather was a private pilot. So they went on this flight from here the day after Christmas. This was back in 71.
Okay.
They flew to Salt Lake City for a ski trip.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was home with her first baby, and she was babysitting her 5-year-old little baby sister. Well, they flew, and they flew through a blizzard, and the entire plane, the plane went down, and nobody survived the plane crash. So she lost her entire family with one foul swoop.
Wow.
And to me, I tell that story, almost just as a matter of fact, but it really is remarkable and incredible. I tell people it's very shocking they hear that. But honestly, I think just with those types of experiences in my mother's story really have impacted her, which I think in turn impacted her family and her children. She looks at things in a whole different light. She's resilient, she's strong, and she believes that there's greater purpose for everything. And I believe very much that way. My father is also that way. And I'm talking to my biological father. I'm very close with my stepfather as well. He really raised me. But my biological father, who I'm very, very close with as well, is also very, very spiritual and in touch with his emotions and deeper meanings and what the universe brings to us. And it's fun because whenever I get together with them, we have these amazing, deep conversations. And the coolest part is when I met Eric, my husband, that's how he is. We were on the same level of thinking and just mindset with all of those things. So when you're living with that and you're surrounding yourself with people like that, yes, you really do live that way. So for me, do I manifest these things? I think nothing is left to chance. I think things happen for a very good reason in every part of our lives. So that's how I look at things. So yes, I think I'm exactly where I should be at the current time, always at any given time.
Sure.
So yeah, that has very deep meaning to me.
That's awesome.
That is really cool. Have you taken that mindset and reflected that on your children? Is it just by the way you act and talk to them, or do you do like a practical exercise with them where you're like, you guys can focus and have anything you want type of, exercises with them? How's that work with you?
Again, we're a very open, loving family, and we talk a lot with our kids. It's funny, and everybody brags about their children, but honestly, I have some of the coolest kids.
Yeah.
People that meet them say that all the time. They're like, gosh, you have such cool kids. They're just so in touch with things that typical children of those ages aren't. They think differently, and I think it just becomes, it's like with me, it was sort of, I was brought up around that type of energy, and I know that that's the same experience that they're having. So for me, I think it's just both. It's communication and talking that way and feeling that way, but just living your life that way. It makes people open.
Really?
And it makes them kind and just real. I'm all about being real. It's funny, you go to your parent-teacher conference and you're scared to death what they're going to say because your kid may not have, well, you're scared to death because your kids may not have the best grades or whatever. But when we sit down with those teachers, the first thing we ask is like, how are they with people? Do they care? Are they kind? Do people like them? Are they good people? And of course, hands down, that's the first thing they say. They're like, oh my gosh, they're amazing kids. I wish I had 10 more like them because they're those kind of people.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you place a lot of emphasis on EQ, that emotional quotient. And I just finished an audiobook on it. And the likelihood of success in any facet of life, financially, educationally, whatever your metric of success is exponentially higher with a high EQ versus a high IQ.
Right.
And as entrepreneurs, I mean, we all get that. Not to devalue education by any means. We're all sitting here with degrees,
Right.
But that life is the game of people, and you've got to be able to, regardless of what industry you end up in, you've got to put yourself in a place where you're relatable, and I think that education, the sooner it starts and the more emphasis you place on it, the more likely your your kids will be successful. And you obviously live in that professionally, but it's interesting to hear that you make it also a point of emphasis in raising your children as well.
Oh yeah, it's essential. They need to know that anything is possible. I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, you always drive that message home. That's all you want, is for your kids to be happy. That's the ultimate goal. And like you said, you gauge your measure of success. For me, it's, are you happy in your life? Do you feel good? Are you happy with what you're doing? Just what are the relationships that you have? Because honestly, at the end of the day, you can be a multi-billionaire, but what are your relationships like? Who do you know? Who do you love? Who loves you? You know, what does that look like? Paint that picture.
Yeah. And are you asking those questions as early, how old is your youngest?
He is 6. He's 6.
Are you having that kind of conversation? Maybe not in that tone or in those words,
right.
But are you delivering that message that young already?
Oh yeah, it's because that's how we live.
I'm asking very selfishly because I've got a 3 and a 1-year-old.
It's never too early.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just with simple things that you say and how you operate day to day, how you treat people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many examples that you can give to your children at such young ages, because they're always watching, they're always listening.
Right.
So I don't care how old they are. You know, when they see you be just a simple act of human kindness,
Yeah.
it goes miles. They see that. You have to be the example. If you want them to be those kinds of people,
Yeah.
you have to be that example. You got to live it. Be the example. It's that simple. So yeah, absolutely. With any age, it starts at any age.
I love that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm really starting to realize that to be fact because my son dropped the F-bomb for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's happening.
I'm like, oh, he really is paying attention.
That's no bueno right there.
Oh, that's a funny one when that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You can't say that. Those are adult words.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, we've all been there.
Well, good. I'm happy it's not just me. I don't feel like such a bad
No,
parent.
I'm not saying I'm far from perfect in that front. Trust me, but you do the best you can.
That's funny.
What have you learned from being a wife and a mother? So first, being a wife, what have you learned from your husband? And then secondly, what have you learned from your children?
I would say, as a wife, first, it's to love big and to compensate and not always put yourself first. It's important for anybody to love you, to love yourself first. I know that to be true. But I also feel very strongly that it's okay to be selfless and put somebody else before you, because not only is it the right thing to do, at times it makes you feel good. So for me, in my relationship, there's times when I have to put myself and my ego aside, which I'm a very competitive. This is one of my flaws, big time, one of many. I'm very competitive and very driven to a fault. And I get called out on that a lot. And there are a lot of times when I have to just say, okay, just put that down, because it doesn't even relate in this situation. And a lot of times that's in my marriage, because it's just silly. It doesn't make any sense. What does it mean to win?
Sure.
So you have to really pick your battles and see what makes sense. So from a perspective of a wife, I think that's key. And that's something I've learned. And that takes time. It's not easy.
Right.
Being in a marriage, it's not easy to coexist with somebody all the time. And try to as you're moving and changing and growing, to stay right here, it's tough.
Yeah.
You have to navigate it. It takes work and effort and communication. With kids, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that, it keeps you real. It keeps you real and humble, and you think that you could be the greatest thing ever, and your kids, they're just honest, and they keep things real, and it's awesome. Because they teach you things that you had no idea you didn't know. So I just think with life experience, being a mom and being a parent and watching them grow and see how they change and evolve, it's incredible. And it's beyond me. It's beyond us. It's really them.
Yeah.
It's just lessons. You just watch.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I want all the single ladies, to quote Beyonce, to really hear that message in what you talk about with your husband, and that to receive love, you have to love yourself first. because I can't tell you how much dialogue I have just in the gym, let alone outside conversation, with women in particular struggling in their mind to find their other half, their penguin, their lobster, whatever other.
I never heard that in my life.
Monogamous, dude. I'm a National Geographic freak, man. So you got all that Planet Earth thing going on.
Yeah, I never heard that. I'm gonna use that. You are my penguin.
Yeah.
That's so great. I'll try to find my penguin,
Dude,
bro.
I'm telling you, it's real.
She's out there, right? Sorry.
Oh God.
They're like,
that's great.
Because like you.
Thanks for the laugh.
You're welcome. We're gonna talk about you swimming next.
Yeah.
But just like you and your husband find yourself in a place where you're the example couples aspire to be. My wife and I find us in that very fortunate boat as well, and that's always my wife's message to these young girls, or just the single girls in general, is like, he will show up as soon as you start loving yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
But if the expectation is to
Find it from them.
get love from the outside first, if that's your priority, it'll always be misguided.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that that message is brought to the forefront often enough, and
Right.
I think that it's often just overlooked in general.
Yeah, that's something my husband says to our boys all the time, and he is an amazing example to them.
Your husband's a great communicator, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, in sitting with you guys at the table at the Child Hope Gala a couple of months ago, and just watching you two in each other's space.
Yeah.
Like Nicole and I are sitting at the table, like, they match.
Really?
You know what I mean? Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh,
like
that's
you
sweet.
you guys are one of those couples. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, we feel that, but it's nice to hear that sometimes.
y'all got the peas and carrots peanut butter jelly thing going on. You know what I'm saying?
This guy's giving me today.
It's the penguin.
Penguins,
right?
peas and carrots, bro. I'm with it.
You guys got it going on that way.
That's
So
good.
from what I would consider to be a successful couple to
Yeah.
another, you
Yeah.
guys are definitely exemplify that.
I appreciate that. And it's funny, what I was saying was my husband is such a good role model for my boys in finding the right mate eventually in life. And it's not like you're spending your life seeking that person out, like
Right.
we just said.
Mm-hmm.
He always says to them, be the right guy. People should
Man.
stop trying to find the right male or female. Be the right guy. Be the right woman.
Mm-hmm.
Be that person first, and then all of a sudden it happens. It's just what you just said. He says that to our boys all the time. He's like, just be the right guy.
That's
be
awesome.
the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then things just happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to that. He's very, very wise
Mm-hmm.
and a great example. I'm grateful that my boys see that. He treats me like gold.
Mm-hmm.
So I know for a fact, and my boys treat me like gold, and I know that that's how they'll treat their future wives, and that's all you can ask for, because again, you got to be the example.
Right.
And we put each other first too. Another thing he does, when one of my kids is giving us attitude, which happens all the time.
Sure.
He'll say, one of them says something sassy, and he'll look at them straight in the face and say, "Don't you talk to my wife like that."
Ooh.
And they'll be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because they know that he's like, hey, listen, we're first. You're over here, but you need to respect this person that I,
Right.
put over here.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing. It's those examples that they learn as young men and as they grow. So
I love
it's
that.
pretty cool.
For sure.
Yeah, he does. He says that all the time. Don't
Yeah.
talk to my wife like that.
I love it.
He also says it to them. So if one of them's being a jerk to the other one, because they
Right.
do it all the time, he'll be like, don't talk to my son like that. And they're
Sure.
kind of like, oh, but he does it with all of them at different times.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
it's important for them to know that. It's like we're looking at them like we're looking out for them.
Right.
You should too. So cut it out.
Sure.
So
Love it.
That's really
great.
good. Yeah,
That's
I like
awesome.
that. That's really cool. Have you and your husband made, like, as far as like you're both entrepreneurs, you both have proactive or busy schedules. Do you set standing dates for one another, like a date night, like Friday at 6? Like no matter what happens, like we drop everything and we're spending time with one another.
We are very, very good at dating, and that's another thing that Eric always says: never, ever, ever stop dating your wife. It's so important. So yes, we don't have a set date night, but we go on a date at least once a week.
Oh, nice.
We take time aside all the time. We spend a lot of time together because we enjoy each other's company. So yeah, for us, it's fun. It's easy. That's an easy thing for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, to answer your question, yes, absolutely.
That's
we have
cool.
date nights all
That's
the time.
cool. That's an easy thing because a lot of people, you know, I'll speak myself included, like things come up and I'm just like, oh, well, like I'll pass events because what I'm doing has in my mind more merit for whatever reason. And you find out at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I could have done that extra hour at at a certain event. But we drop things thinking like for what we consider priority at the time is finally really not that high priority. So that's great that you have that.
Exactly. Yeah, we're very lucky, both of us, that way. We're both extremely busy, and we juggle a lot, both of us. So it's not always easy.
Yeah.
Well, I think people also overcomplicate a lot of things, but specifically that.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to be, filet and wine at Mastro's. You know what I mean? Like date night could be just as simple as going and getting some ice cream. You know what I mean? Like just putting the kids to bed and sitting out on the porch.
That's what we
with a
do
glass
probably
of wine.
most.
Like
is
that's
that.
a date.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be, this big
Event.
to do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not an event.
Yeah.
It's just you just get there.
Yeah.
You just spend the time. You're absolutely. We do that all the time. Like I was telling you, we'll talk and
Sure.
we just get gabby for the whole night. And it's usually we're just sitting out on the back patio. Kids are in bed because we can't talk as freely, obviously, when they're around. Especially the older. And I will tell you
Then they
this.
start dropping F-bombs.
The older they get.
You know?
Well, no. So my 6-year-old one day, he's sitting there and he looks at me and he goes, I don't know if I can say this. on the show.
You're good.
Yeah,
He
you can.
goes, what the fuck?
That just happened to me. It literally
And I'm
just
like,
happened to me.
I look at him, I'm like, what? I mean, I couldn't help but laugh. I immediately started laughing because it was hilarious to hear him say that.
Yeah.
but
Sure.
It was pretty funny. It was like, oh my gosh. So you hear that and you're like, okay, I'm clearly not doing everything right.
Right.
But whatever. So I'm like, those are words that only certain, you should say as an adult. And I also tell my older kids as they get older, know your audience. I don't care if you cuss. I don't care if you swear. We all do it. They're just words in the English language, I guess. But just know your audience.
Right.
Do it when it's appropriate.
Sure.
And when it's not, just don't. So it's that simple. But they start to my point in saying that is they start to listen. So you have to have time away because we always joke. There's ears in the cornfield. So we have to kind of like, tone it down with what we're talking about because all of a sudden my oldest will come in and be like, so what's the story with so-and-so or whatever we're talking about. And we're just like, oh crap.
Oh no.
Yeah. They listen. They hear everything.
Noted.
Right.
They are always listening. Trust me. They
Got it.
are. Yes, for sure.
I'm gonna have to put like the bubble wrap in the hallway,
Right, under
so
the
they can
door.
hear-
Totally.
so they hear 'em coming in the middle
Sound
of
Well,
the
we
night.
have a
Everything.
lot. We have a loft, so there's
Okay.
and it's open aired, so
Sure.
and that's kind of where their domain. It's like their playroom.
Yeah.
And so it's like, who's up in the loft?
Because the voice is going to
he's like,
carry.
he'll be
over the
Eric will be
corner.
like, is Tyler up there?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Like the room is bugged.
Right.
totally. That's what it feels like.
That's
There's no
awesome.
privacy. It's
Oh
bad.
man. Excuse me. Before we let you go, because you've alluded to multiple times in this conversation how your life is minute to minute, hour to hour. Very very much on a calendar. Let's talk about your daily routine really quick. What do you do each and every day to empower your journey? What do you do for you each and every day?
I try to have faith and believe that whatever's going to happen, regardless of what it is, that it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And I try to just keep a calm frame of mind. And I to be honest with you, Eric is really good at helping me with that because I tend to get very stressed very easily and overwhelmed, and it just like feels like the walls come caving in. The best thing for me to do to manage that is to just literally look at my life and take a look around, take a deep breath and say, oh my gosh, everything's fine. I mean, really, what are you worried about? There are so many worse things to be stressed about than that you're running 5 minutes late or whatever the thing is that day that's stressing you out, a deadline or whatever. There are so many bigger problems to have. And that's also something that Eric and I both talk about. It's funny, you sit around a table and everybody busts out their problems.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, you're probably just gonna be like, I'm just gonna keep my problems right over here. I think I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So you have to just keep in mind that life is hard, and you have to just manage it the best you can and count your blessings. And for me, that's really the best way for me to manage it. I would love to say that I have some sort of release, like I work out every day.
Yeah.
I used to do that, but I have been truly so busy that it's been tougher for me to do that. That is a huge release for me. I love to hike. I love the outdoors. I'm very, very much in touch with the outdoors. So if I have a choice, I'd rather be outside than any other place.
Sure.
We camp and do things like that. And family trips, that's another way that we kind of stay grounded. It's like we put time aside. You asked about dates. We have an RV. So we take our family RVing, and those types of things are what bring you back to what really matters. And you have to forget about all the things that don't, because they really don't. In the big picture, they just don't. So I try to remember those things the best I can. It's not always easy, and I'm not always good at it, but I try. So
Right
for
on.
me, that's how I look at it.
That's dope. Love your mindset. Where can everybody in this community go follow you and support you with everything you have going, your publications, online platforms, anything you have?
Right now, the biggest thing truly is just our social media tags for Paradise Valley Lifestyle, and North Scottsdale Lifestyle for those two magazines. But that's really kind of where I am. I'm not a huge person as a public figure per se. But yeah, any support anybody can give, and I'm always happy to talk to whoever. So anybody wants to reach out, they can reach out via email or
For sure.
phone or whatever.
Right on.
Dope.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Well, thanks.
Thanks
This
for
is
making
great.
the time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You got a lot going on,
Yeah.
so to take time out of your day to be here with us two knuckleheads is awesome.
No, it's worth it. I know what this is. This is for me. This is a spiritual exercise, which I enjoy.
Love it. Awesome. Well, guys, make sure you get out there and support everything that Tammy has going on, especially if you're local. Check out Paradise Valley Lifestyle, North Scottsdale Lifestyle, and see what's out there. It's not just the themes, but it's also the goings on. So there's a lot of great stuff in here. So appreciate you taking the time.
Yep.
And
Thank you so much.
until next time, guys, feed me, fuel me.